I want to talk about God today, and I need you to sit with me for a while before you decide whether you agree or disagree with what I am about to say, because this is not a debate. This is not an argument. This is one old man who has spent his whole life in conversation with the Creator, telling you what that conversation has taught him. I am not here to challenge your faith. I am not here to replace your beliefs. I am here to tell you what I know. And what I know did not come from a book. It came from living, from watching people be born and watching people die, from sitting in silence long enough that the silence started talking back, from standing on land older than any word ever spoken about God and feeling in my own body the presence of the thing that made it. What I know about God did not come from a classroom or a pulpit. It came from the dirt, the river, the fire, the faces of people I loved, and from the quiet space between breaths where something larger than me made itself known without saying a single word. The first thing I want to tell you is this: God is real. I will not play games with you about that. I am not one of those people who dances around the question until you walk away more confused than when you arrived. God is real. The Creator is real. The force that holds the stars in their places and turns the seasons and puts a heartbeat inside a body made from nothing. That force is real. I have felt it not once, but many times. In the wind that arrived at the exact moment I needed to feel something bigger than my own pain. In the sunrise that broke over the mesa the morning after I buried someone I loved, reminding me without words that the world was still turning and I was still in it. In the eyes of a newborn that looked at me with a knowing a newborn should not have, as if the child had just come from somewhere and still remembered what it looked like. God is real. And if you have ever doubted that, I do not blame you. The world has given you plenty of reasons to doubt, but your doubt does not change the reality. The sun does not stop existing because someone closes their eyes. And God does not stop being real because someone stops believing. God is patient enough to wait. But here is what I need to say next, and this is where I will lose some of you, and that is all right. The God that is real is not necessarily the God you were handed. The God you were taught about may have been true in some ways and badly mistaken in others, because the God most people carry in their minds was placed there by other human beings, parents, teachers, preachers, writers, institutions. And every one of those people, however sincere, had limits. They could only describe God using the words and the understanding available to them. And God is larger than any human understanding. So every description of God, including mine, is incomplete. Every tradition that claims to hold the full picture of God is holding one piece of a puzzle so vast that no person, no institution, no book has ever seen the whole of it. My people have a way of knowing. Your people have a way of knowing. The people on the far side of the world have a way of knowing. And the mistake, the terrible mistake that has caused more suffering than almost anything else in human history, is when one group holds up their piece and says, "This is the whole puzzle, and everyone else's piece is false." That is not faith. That is arrogance wearing the costume of faith, and I do not believe God is honored by it. Let me tell you about the God I know, not the God I was taught, because there is a difference between the two. The God I was taught came from our elders, our ceremonies, our stories, and I still hold all of that with respect. But the God I know came from experience, from decades of paying close attention. And the God I know is simpler and larger and gentler and far more mysterious than any description I was ever given as a child. The God I know does not keep a ledger. I have to say that plainly, because so many of you were raised with a God who tracks every sin, every failure, every weak moment, writing it all down in a book to be opened on Judgment Day. And that accountant God, that God with the ledger, has kept millions of people in a low, constant fear their whole lives. Afraid to make a mistake, afraid to be human, afraid that something they did decades ago is sitting in a file somewhere waiting to be used against them. I do not believe in that God, not because I dismiss your scripture, but because I have watched too many good people live in terror of a God they also insist is love, and those two things cannot both be true at once. Real love does not terrorize. A parent who truly loves a child does not keep a record of every mistake the child has made and threaten to hold it over them forever. That is not love. That is control. And God is not a controller. God is the opposite of control. God is the force that sets you free. Free to choose, free to fail, free to learn, free to stumble and stumble again and rise again. Your freedom is the proof of God's love, not your obedience. Your freedom. I knew a man named Joseph who spent 60 years afraid of God. 60 years. He grew up in a house where God was a weapon. His father used scripture to enforce silence. His mother used it to enforce obedience. The church they attended used it to enforce sameness. So Joseph grew up believing God watched him the way a guard watches a prisoner, waiting for the one wrong step. And Joseph lived his whole life inside that fear. He never sang because he was told God frowned on a man enjoying his own voice. He never asked the hard questions because questions were treated like rebellion. He denied himself joy, laughter, rest, because he was told God wanted him small and quiet and afraid. And near the end of his life, sitting across from me, he said something that broke something open in my chest. He said, "I have been a good man my whole life, and I am still afraid to die, because I do not know if I was good enough. 60 years of trying to be good, and it still was not enough. Because a God who demands perfection can never be satisfied. The bar keeps moving. The fear never runs out." Joseph spent a lifetime serving a version of God his parents built to control a frightened child. And that child grew old, still controlled, still afraid, still unsure. That is what the ledger God does to a person. It steals their peace, not for a season, but for a lifetime. And I do not believe the Creator intended that. I believe the Creator grieves when a man like Joseph spends 60 years afraid of the very thing that loves him most. The God I know does not ask you to be good enough. The God I know asks you to be honest. Honest about your failures, your fears, the plain fact that you are a human being who makes mistakes and does not have it all figured out and gets scared and gets selfish and gets lost sometimes. God already knows this about you. Pretending otherwise insults the intelligence of a Creator who made you knowing exactly what you would be. You were not made to be flawless. You were made to be real. And a real person, offered honestly to the Creator, is worth more than a perfect performance offered out of fear. I want to speak now to the people who are angry at God, because I know you are out there. Maybe you prayed for something and it never came. Maybe you asked God to spare someone and they were not spared. Maybe you did everything right, followed every rule, lived as clean a life as you knew how, and the suffering arrived anyway. The diagnosis came anyway. The loss came anyway. And you looked up and asked, "Where were you? I did everything you asked." And the silence that answered you was louder than any words could have been. I know that anger. I have stood over a grave that should not have been dug yet, and asked the sky why, and gotten nothing back but wind and the slow, ordinary continuing of a world that refused to pause for my grief. But let me offer you a different way of seeing it. Not a better way, just another one. What if God's silence is not absence? What if it is the deepest form of respect? What if the Creator, who could intervene at any moment, who could end every sickness and stop every death, chooses not to, not from cruelty, but from honor, from a recognition that your life belongs to you, that your experience, even the painful parts, especially the painful parts, is what shapes who you become? What if God trusts you the way a parent trusts a child enough to let them fall, not because the parent does not care, but because they know falling is how a child learns to stand? What if the silence is not abandonment, but the sound of a Creator who loves you enough to let you become who you are meant to become without interfering? I am not telling you this is the answer. I am telling you it is a possibility that has given me more peace than any sermon ever did. I want to talk about where God lives, because here my tradition and many others part ways, and I think the parting matters. Many of you were taught God lives in a particular place, in heaven above the clouds, on a throne in a building with a steeple, inside a book bound in leather. And when you want to find God, you go to that place. You enter the building. You open the book. You look upward. That is a beautiful way to seek, and I do not dismiss it. But my people knew God somewhere else. My people knew God in everything. In the hawk turning above the canyon, in the river that runs without being told which way to go, in the roots holding the earth together without anyone thanking them, in the fire that warms you and the same fire that burns you, because God lives in both. In the stranger who helps you and the enemy who teaches you. God is not located somewhere. God is the location. God is not merely in the world. God is the world. Every stone, every leaf, every drop of rain, every breath moving through your chest right now, none of it is being watched from a distance. It is being breathed through. You do not need to travel anywhere to find God. You need to stop traveling everywhere and become still. In that stillness, you will feel what was there the entire time. Not far away, not hidden, not waiting to be earned. As near as your own pulse, nearer. My grandmother never prayed on her knees. She prayed on her feet, walking the land she believed was the body of the Creator itself. She did not close her eyes to pray. She opened them wider, because to her, prayer was not about shutting out the world to reach God. It was about seeing the world so clearly that God became visible inside every part of it. She prayed while she cooked, because the food was a gift from the earth and preparing it was an act of gratitude. She prayed while she washed her hands in the creek, because the water was alive, and touching it meant touching something sacred. She prayed when she sat beside someone in grief, because presence in the face of pain was the highest prayer a human being could offer. Her whole life was a prayer, not because she performed one, but because she could not stop seeing God everywhere once she started looking. I want to tell you what happens when you start looking for God in everything instead of in one place. The world changes, and not in some symbolic way. It actually looks different. The meal you cook stops being a chore and becomes an offering. The walk you take stops being exercise and becomes a pilgrimage. The person across from you stops being a burden and becomes something carrying the sacred inside them, whether they know it or not. My grandmother used to say boredom is proof a person has stopped looking for God, because God is in everything, and a person searching for God in everything never runs out of reasons to be amazed. The way light shifts in late afternoon, the way a tree bends in a storm without snapping, the way a child laughs without a trace of self-consciousness, the way dough rises, the way fire knows exactly how to burn without ever being taught. All of it is the Creator at work in front of you, every day, all day. Most people walk past it because they were taught to look for God in one room on one day of the week, and the rest of the week they go blind. My grandmother was never blind. She saw God everywhere because she looked for God everywhere, and that looking was the truest prayer I have ever witnessed. I also want to speak honestly about suffering, because no honest conversation about God can avoid it. If God is real and God is love, why do good people suffer? Why do children fall ill? Why do the faithful bury their families? I do not have a full answer to that. Anyone who claims to have a complete one is either lying or has not suffered enough yet. But here is what I have noticed. Every person I have known who passed through real suffering and came out the other side said some version of the same thing. The suffering changed them. Not destroyed them, changed them. Made them deeper, more compassionate, more present, more grateful for small things, more capable of love, as if the pain carved out a space inside them that could hold more than it held before. I am not saying suffering is good. I am saying it is not wasted, not if you let it carve you instead of crush you. Maybe that carving is one of the quiet ways the Creator works, not by removing the pain, but by using it to make you large enough to hold whatever comes next. I cannot prove that, but I have lived it. I want to speak to those who have lost their faith, not the ones who are angry, the ones who are simply empty, who used to believe and one day just stopped, not with a decision but slowly, the way a fire dies when nobody feeds it. You did not choose to stop believing, you just stopped feeling it. The prayers started to feel like talking to yourself. The scripture started to feel like ink on a page. The rituals started to feel like motions with no warmth behind them. And now you sit somewhere between belief and disbelief, in the empty space where something warm used to live. I want to tell you that emptiness is not the end. It is the beginning, because the faith that died in you was never the final faith. It was the first one, the one handed to you by other people, built from their words and their rules and their reading of something far too vast for any one group to read completely. That faith served its purpose and then it stopped, and its dying felt like losing God, but you did not lose God. You lost a description of God. The description expired. The thing it was describing did not. God is still here, waiting for you to find a new way of seeing, one that belongs to you, not inherited, not borrowed, not handed down from someone behind a podium. That new way might not resemble religion at all. It might look like a walk before sunrise, a quiet thank you before a meal, sitting with someone in pain, a long look at the sky with no words and no requests, just looking and being looked at in return. That is faith too. The second faith, the one that grows in the ashes of the first, stronger than what it replaced, because nobody gave it to you. You grew it yourself, in your own ground, with your own water, and it is entirely yours. I want to leave you with this. God is not a subject to win an argument about. God is not a debate, not a test you pass or fail. God is the most intimate relationship you will ever have, closer than marriage, closer than parenthood, closer than any bond between two people. Because this one does not require the other party to be in the room or even alive. It exists in the space between your thoughts, in the pause between breaths, in the quiet behind the noise of your life. You need no one's permission to reach it. No gatekeeper, no middleman, no membership, no building, no book. Just you and the thing that made you, face to face, the way it always was before the institutions arrived, before the rules were written down, before anyone claimed to hold the keys. It was once just a person and the sky was enough. It still is, it always will be. Go outside, look up, talk. You do not need the right words or a formula. You only need the willingness to be honest with whatever is listening, and something is listening. I have spent my whole life proving that to myself, and I have never once been let down. The last thing I want to share is a moment I had with God that no church gave me and no book prepared me for. I was standing by the river near my home, early morning, the sun just breaking over the ridge, the light striking the water and scattering into 1,000 small pieces across the rocks and the trees and the air itself. And for no reason I could explain, I felt held. Not touched, held, the way a mother holds an infant, completely without condition, without judgment, without demand. Held by the light, by the water, by the morning, by whatever made the light and the water and the morning. I stood there and I cried, not from sadness, but from recognition. I knew what was holding me. It was the same thing that had held me the day I was born. The same thing that carried me through every loss and every failure. The same thing that will be there when I take my final breath. It had always been there. I had simply been too busy, too afraid, too crowded with other people's descriptions of it to feel it for myself. That morning by the river, I felt it, and everything I thought I understood about God shrank beside what I actually felt, because what I felt was not a theology, it was a presence, and the presence was love. Not the word, the thing itself, larger than any word, older than any language, available to you right now, today, if you are willing to stop talking about God long enough to feel God. That is what I know, and it is enough. Tell me honestly, in your own words, what your relationship with God looks like right now. Not the version you perform for other people, the real one. I read everything you write, and if this is the kind of conversation you came here for, stay close. I am not finished teaching.